So we'll go ahead and get started here. Thank you everybody for being here and good evening. My name is Sergeant Kevin Allen. I'll be your moderator for tonight's event, and we're grateful to have so many community members here. Looks like 21 participants, including our city staff, so that's great. So we're here today to talk about the 2022 annual report. As part of this evening, we'll hear from Chief Lovell, and we'll also hear from our precinct commander, Rob Simon. First, a couple of housekeeping matters. We will be taking questions, and we encourage you to ask questions during the presentation, but we won't be answering them until after the presentation is concluded. So you can put the questions in the chat during the presentation, but we'll wait until everyone is finished before we address them. We understand many of you will have questions, and we'll try to get to as many as possible. Or if there are several on the same topic, then I'll go through and consolidate those questions and put them to the appropriate person. We're also recording this presentation. Actually, we're live streaming the presentation on YouTube, and we will also put a recorded version of it on YouTube up after the fact, so anyone can watch or follow along with the meeting. If you have any specific questions regarding any of the technical stuff, also you can put questions in the chat, and our host will respond to your questions. So with that, I will turn it over to Chief Chuck Lovell, who will give the presentation today. Chief, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Kevin. And thank you to everyone for being here today, taking time out of your schedules to hear our annual report presentation. I'm pleased to have this opportunity to talk with all of you about 2020. To get the conversation started, I'm going to share with you an overview of the major issues from last year, and where possible, provide updates on where we are today. The challenge of reporting on last year is that by the time the report comes out, things may have changed. So we'll try to give you the latest information about certain issues. Before we go any further, I want to say how proud I am of our professional staff and our personnel in the sworn ranks, and how grateful I am for their resiliency. We've had more challenges in the last few years than any time in modern history, and yet they continue to be innovative, come with solutions to whatever problems are presented to them. And I want to publicly share my support for them and thank them for the amazing work they continue to do for our city. So tonight we'll be sharing both our accomplishments and challenges. We hope by doing so, we will build a greater understanding about the current state of PPB within the community. Community policing remains our goal, and a positive relationship between police and the community is necessary for success. But there are obstacles in our way. We've heard from community members about the desire for greater police presence and response. Messaging our limitations can lead to fear within the community that they are not being heard or that meaningful solutions are too far off. We want to be realistic and manage expectations, but balance that with the hope of progress as we reimagine public safety. Tonight, I'll provide a summary of the annual report, and then we'll answer any questions you may have. Let's start with some of the main themes from last year. Staffing remains a challenge in every division, with both our sworn and professional staff. We'll be talking about that tonight and what we're doing to address it. We'll talk about the increase in crime and fatal crashes tonight and what is being done to address that as well. It's important to note that Portland Police do not operate in a vacuum. Our partners also face challenges, both in the jail and prosecution of the cases we bring. We'll also talk about the use of deadly force, the STOPS data report that just came out, and how we intend to keep our commitment to bias-free policing. So let's start with our accomplishments. Our equity and inclusion team completed the Bureau's 5-year racial equity plan and continues recruiting members to the Equity Advisory Council. The Bureau's recruitment efforts were revamped, and the Bureau received 1,513 applications for police officers, hiring 80 new officers. I'll tell you up front that 63 sworn members either resigned or retired last year, so that's only a net gain of 17. However, we're proud of the hiring efforts and certainly the number of applicants. we're still seeing people who want to be Portland police officers, and that's very encouraging. We revised and created more than 20 directives this year, or in 2020, or 2022. New directives included procedural justice and wellness. Additionally, the team updated the suite of mental health related policies that are at the center and focus of our DOJ settlement agreement. We also overhauled the Bureau's policies pertaining to reporting and reviewing uses of force, including establishing clearer standards for when force is authorized and the accompanying reporting and investigation requirements. And finally, we updated policies related to foot pursuits and consent searches that we'll discuss later. Our training division was busy as always. They conducted academies for in-service, advanced academy, cadets, sergeants academy, and public safety support specialists, or PS3s. They conducted training evals for most of its programs. They're also PS3s, ways to enhance quality of training, maximize training time, and improve operations. Our wellness program continued to make investments with pilot programs for healthy food and sleep classes. Wellness remains a top priority to help with retention of our members, as well as increase morale by improving emotional, mental, and physical fitness of our members. Despite our staffing levels, our precinct commanders were charged with using their resources as effectively as possible. They looked for ways to conduct missions, directed patrols, bicycle patrols, and neighborhood response team missions in ways that impact the rises in crime documented in the report. As you know, stolen vehicles have increased drastically over the last year. Officers also noticed a nexus between stolen vehicles and illegal weapons. Responding to this trend, our East Precinct began a series of stolen vehicle missions, or as we call them, SVOs. In order to ensure these missions were informed and data-driven, PPB SVO leadership approached researchers at OHSU who agreed to review both the data and methodology proposed by our team at East. As a result, evidence-based practices have been refined through the unique collaboration. The partnership has shown incredible results. The data showed in the non-evidence-based practice missions, only 1 in every 31 vehicles stopped was an occupied stolen vehicle, and the arrest ratio was 1 in every 6. In the missions conducted after the evidence-based practices were applied, 1 in every 6 vehicles stopped by the team is a stolen, and someone is arrested once in every 3 stops. We reformulated the entertainment detail in 2022. As people began coming back to the bars and late night establishments, we observed an increase in the number of shootings in these areas. We responded by restaffing this detail to provide patrol coverage during peak hours. The number of shootings after the entertainment detail was reconstituted last year were 0. Street racing has been a chronic problem in recent years. Illegal street racing continues to be a seasonal event, drawing hundreds to these dangerous events. Many people are armed. Often they are occurring in multiple locations at the same time. Missions were conducted last year in response to street racing. Here again, we have observed results. Last year, we anticipated several hundred events, but there were only several dozen. We need the appropriate resources to continue the good work resulting from these missions by putting together teams for this purpose. We also worked with our legislative partners to pass Senate Bill 615, which increases penalties for street racing. This bill became law on June 6, 2023. Our neighborhood response teams are on the front line of our response to the rise in crime. They were highly effective at addressing cases of criminal behavior involving larger groups. We hope to expand their work more broadly citywide, as there are several other areas where this work is needed. Our Central Precinct Bike Squad was also very effective downtown and in Northwest, especially addressing fentanyl use, illegal weapons, and stolen vehicles. These results show the value of proactive policing and we need appropriate staffing to grow the work and tremendous results of their efforts. Our behavioral health unit continues to be a significant resource. They did around 99 trainings and events last year, not only within the city, but also with private organizations and other law enforcement personnel. Our Office of Community Engagement integrated the Bureau's bias crime unit with community advisory councils to improve communication, trust earning efforts, and to allow for a cultural exchange. The office also facilitated many other community meetings, workshops, and cultural engagements that help foster meaningful relationships. The Bureau continued conducting its Community Police Academy, in which community members work with police officer partners in a day-long setting of classroom and practical scenarios. PPB also continued its Community Active Shooter Preparedness, which has delivered about 200 classes to safety-impacted community organizations and businesses since 2013. While we had accomplishments for which I'm very proud of the employees of the Bureau, we also face many challenges. As I mentioned, staffing is a big part of the conversation. I was looking over my notes from last year and how I discussed that I had to make the difficult decision to move officers from traffic, narcotics, public information, community engagement, and more to increase the number of patrol officers to about 375 officers. Currently, we have 286 patrol officers. You can see that that was only a temporary fix. While we've not been seeing the attrition that we saw over the last few years, we do know that as many as 100 sworn members are eligible to retire this year. Because of this, the Bureau will need to be ready to maintain a high rate of hiring to ensure it is adequately filling the positions of those who retire. We also have a large number of officers in the training phase at any given time, and anyone hired today cannot go to the state academy for several months due to the backlog. We have a young workforce. An observation I recently heard hit me as being really profound. The majority of those who serve as officers in the coming few years don't even work here yet. The need to recruit and retain qualified candidates is critical for us to address. We often talk about patrol, but we also face staffing issues throughout the Bureau, including our investigations branch. Insufficient staffing impacts our proactive policing. We're limited in doing missions to try to focus on prolific thieves, drug houses, chronic livability issues, and other issues that community members say they want addressed. Finally, it's important to discuss our professional staff, who are the foundation of our Bureau. Last year, we hired 52, but we lost 34 professional staff. Our records division staffing was the lowest it had been in modern history. I'm happy to say it has been staffed up and is making great strides in their backlog. We've been challenged to meet our minimum staffing on the street. Our analysts define minimum staffing as the number of officers we need to respond to 911 emergency calls. We're currently focusing on how best to respond to these calls. We continue to work with BOEC, which is the Bureau of Emergency Communications, and the Community Services or Community Safety Division. And we've made progress on diverting calls to the most appropriate responders. Shootings, homicides, and other violence impacts our ability to timely respond to other types of calls. In addition, we often have officers from one precinct travel to another in order to help that precinct with their call load. We understand that even one extra minute can deeply impact a victim or decrease the chance of apprehending a suspect. People want and expect a police response when calling for help for a crime, and we strive to be there for them. Staffing also dramatically affects our ability to engage in effective community policing. As I've been saying since taking the job, building community trust is a top priority for this organization. That requires stronger relationships, which take time to cultivate. Our officers need the time to be able to build on those vital relationships. Let's turn to crime statistics. In 2022, person crimes decreased slightly by 2%, but remained above the prior 5-year average. We continued to see gun violence. This number remained fairly stable with only 7 fewer incidents reported in 2022 for a total of 1,308 incidents. Shooting incidents were 48% higher than the prior 3-year average. There were 94 homicides in Portland in 2022, including 76 that involved a firearm. This was an increase of 6% over 2021. Last year, I made the decision to temporarily shutter the cold case unit. This was in order to create 3 teams of detectives. This gives us more effective coverage to address the drastic rise in homicides. In the 10 years prior to 2020, Portland averaged about 25 homicides per year. So you can see the significant jump. We've had a 60% reduction in staffing in our narcotics and organized crime unit, which investigates drug traffickers. Meanwhile, our community is seeing an increase in overdose deaths. The availability of illegal drugs continues to increase and remains at an all-time high. Property crimes increased 11% over the rate in 2021 and was 20% above the prior 5-year average. In 2022, vandalism increased by more than 2,500 offenses compared to 2021 and was up 66% compared to the prior 5-year average. 2022 had the highest volume of motor vehicle theft on record, with 11,098 offenses reported, a 20% increase over 2021 and a 51% increase over the prior 5-year average. Burglaries were up 17% compared to the prior year and 26% compared to the prior 5-year average. Car prowls, or thefts of items from inside a car, increased 12%. Reports of robberies at businesses increased 41% in 2022. And now for traffic, in 2022, 68 people died on Portland streets. 32 were pedestrians. This is the highest number since 1948. And you can see the numbers here broken out in other categories. Just recently, I relaunched the traffic division on a limited basis. I'm happy we have the motorcycles back doing traffic enforcement and focusing on the high crash corridors. Now I want to move in a different direction and discuss other important topics of interest to the community. The Bureau's training is always a top priority. Training is a critical part of our learning. PPB's training division delivers a wide variety of trainings. Our analysis and research team began to conduct an assessment process for crowd management training in the fall of 2021. This work was further expanded in 2022 to help address concerns related to the use of less lethal equipment. The training division conducted a 2-day in-service training for all sworn members. The first day of training focused on legal updates, patrol procedure principles, firearms, and scenario training, which incorporated critical incident response, procedural justice, and crisis intervention skills. The second day of training focused on mental health response resources, such as Project Respond and Portland Street Response, active bystandership for law enforcement scenario training, which we refer to as ABLE, and directives pertaining to the use of force, workplace harassment, and mental health. Through our learning management system, we publish numerous training videos on a number of directives and legal updates, which is an effective and efficient way of delivering this type of training. Training is woven into everything we do. Our officers are trained in implicit bias and procedural justice. I next want to talk about force, which again is an important topic that always needs to be discussed with our community. Force is an area that has a huge impact on our relationship with community. We spend a tremendous amount of effort to ensure our uses of force are appropriate and that we hold officers accountable when they act outside of policy. We emphasize our overarching principle regarding the use of appropriate and constitutional force in training, as well as our force policy. Our directive says the community expects and the Portland Police Bureau requires that members use only the objectively reasonable force necessary to perform their duties and overcome the threat or resistance of the subject under the totality of the circumstances. Officers initiated 54,380 calls for service in 2022. Force was only used in 0.37% of these calls. Community members or visitors initiated 223,748 calls for service in 2022. Force was only used in 0.2% of these calls. There were 9 uses of deadly force, 4 were fatal, 3 resulted in injury, 1 person was uninjured, and in 1 case, the result is unknown. We understand how applications of deadly force impact our community, and I want to assure you that these cases were thoroughly investigated by both PPB and the District Attorney's Office. In all uses of deadly force, we follow a stringent process which is reflected in Directive 10-10-10. To be transparent about this, summaries of these incidents and every deadly force incident since 2010 are on our website, and I encourage people to look at them on the Open Data portal. Not only is our deadly force information on our website, but you can find all of our use of force numbers on our Open Data portal. In addition to force data, we post stops data on our website. We update our data quarterly and then do a comprehensive analysis of the quarterly data on an annual basis. The 2022 annual stops data report was published this month and is available on our website. PPB performed 13,654 driver stops in 2022, a 3% decrease. While the data shows a decrease, this is likely due to the elimination of the traffic division, and therefore will likely reverse with a partial restaffing of this division. Non-moving violations occurred at a higher rate than in 2021, although this number was nearly equal to 2020. A missing or expired license plate was the primary stop reason. Last year's stop data showed racial disparities in stops. As a result, we made significant changes in our policy and procedures for consent searches and provided training on it. This year's data on consent searches shows less than 1% of drivers were asked to consent to a voluntary search, the lowest rate recorded since data collection on this began in 2018. As part of the stops data collection process, PPB's Strategic Services Division conducted an audit for compliance with policy and procedure. They found inconsistencies in 39 cases. Once these inconsistencies were discovered, the matters were referred to the Internal Affairs Division. Supervisory investigations were then completed for all the cases, and the findings were reviewed by the Internal Affairs Division. The review found that the majority of the reported incidents were caused by a lack of understanding of all the requirements of the new policy and procedure. There was also confusion about reporting when multiple units were assigned to the call, which resulted in data not making it into the system. The investigations resulted in proactive conversations around Directive 650, which governs search, seizures, and inventories. As a result of this process, PPB implemented remedial training on the consent search policy. The training was assigned in May of 2023 and was reviewed by all Bureau members. The Strategic Services Division continues to monitor and audit the process, and I don't expect these issues going forward. We continue to also discuss with community members rights and responsibilities. Those discussions include highlighting that stops and searches are governed by the U.S. and state constitutions, as well as Oregon law. And when stopped, community members have a responsibility to comply with an officer's direction. The legislature recently updated the law in this area in a manner similar to PPB's new policy. PPB has implemented new practices to ensure compliance with these changes. Officers will create a record of their request to search and provide a written explanation of the right. Going beyond the new state law, PPB policy requires officers to provide a card that explains in 5 languages a person's right to refuse to consent to search. This card explains to people that they have the right to say no when asked for consent to search and to withdraw their consent at any time during the search. These steps do not affect existing authority to conduct a search without consent. If the officer has a legal basis to search a person or their car, then please be aware that the officer may still do so, even if the person refuses to give consent for the search. The results of the stops data raise questions about bias-free policing due to the disparities found in stops related to persons of color. This is why I made the change to consent searches. Unfortunately, I don't have reliable data yet on the impact of this change. I want to assure you that our directive requires officers to engage in bias-free policing. These requirements go beyond the requirements of state law. All officers have been trained on implicit bias. The Bureau's Equity and Inclusion Office continues to develop trainings to help officers bring an equity lens to their work in order to decrease bias in policing. This past year, we adopted a policy that conducted a video series on interacting with people in the LGBTQ IA2S+ or queer community. This was a proactive effort on our part to address issues that are faced by these community members. First, as many of you are aware from the media, there were survey responses that were made that were non-constructive. I expect members to interact with everyone with respect and dignity, and I will not tolerate anything less. My intent with this training and education is to increase member understanding and positive interactions with the community. Approximately 900 members, both sworn and professional staff, completed the training. Of those 900, there were 261 comments in response to 3 anonymous surveys, most of which were positive or neutral. I'm proud to say that PPB is one of the first law enforcement agencies who have a directive and training on interacting with the LGBTQ IA2S+ or queer community. I am proud of our directive and our training. To show the members of the Bureau how important this training was to us, all 5 of the chiefs filmed opening remarks for it. And in conclusion, I hope this information is helpful and that it gives you a better understanding of the Police Bureau, of the various things that occurred in 2020, some of the work that's been done, and what remains to be done to address crime, concerns, trust, and livability in the community. I encourage you to get involved either in a community or neighborhood group, stay informed by following our news, budget updates, open data, and more. We always welcome any kind words and support for our officers out there each and every day. We still need your help to encourage and support those interested in becoming members of the Bureau in either a sworn or professional position. Individuals of all backgrounds and experiences help provide value to our agency and our community, so it helps us recruit. Thank you, and now I'd like to introduce North Precinct Commander Rob Simon.
Thanks, Chief. Trying to get my video switch back on here. Just lost it again.
We can see you on our end, Rob, so go ahead whenever you're ready.
Yep, for some reason the screen just minimized all of a sudden when you switched off the share. Introduce myself, my name is Rob Simon. I've been with the Police Bureau now for I'm in my 22nd year. I'll be at 22 years this winter. I've been assigned to North Precinct since the end of January. When I got to North Precinct, my initial focus, which was to follow what Commander Jovic had started. He was only here for a very short time. It was kind of focus on cleaning up some of the internal business items within the precinct. Looked at scheduling, allotment of officers to shifts, using the current call load, some of our overtime coding, vehicle fleet, our wellness program, and then some facility improvements to sort of improve some of our internal morale, kind of get over some of that 2020 malaise that had affected North Precinct personnel, and kind of refocus us on working for the community. Within the last month, we made some personnel changes within our neighborhood response team. We've modified the team's working hours and redirected them to focus a lot on retail theft. And then some of the criminal element that's been within our homeless population, sort of our victimizers of the homeless. We're trying to focus on some of our primary suspects with that. One of the specific changes we made within our NERT team is to further build a relationship with the Impact Reduction Program, which works out of the Office of Management and Finance, is to clean up areas prior to large events coming to North Precinct. Specifically, if there's a sporting event coming to Delta Park, we'll send our NERT team out there to focus on cleaning that area prior to when they show up. Any major concerts around the Rose Quarter, Lloyd Center area. We had the Indy E-Series race out at PIR. There was a NASCAR race out at PIR. Any of the major concerts and conferences in and around the convention center. We try to have a visible presence as we, as the chief mentioned, our personnel is quite limited. So we try to move our team and be very specific and pinpoint is when we're putting officers in places that we get the best bang for our buck, so to speak. Which brings us kind of to the summer. As we roll into the summer, street racing has taken up a lot of our focus. There's been some media coverage recently over last weekend's event, which happened to be much larger than we had anticipated. And as we could see from last weekend, street racing is inherently very dangerous. Saturday night was an incident where we recovered 3 different firearms, had a fatal street racing related motorcycle crash. And then parts of the city were at an absolute standstill due to streets being blocked for prolonged periods of time. And what that does is it creates issues for us when Marine Drive is blocked. We can't get out to areas around Kelly Point Park very quickly. We have to go all the way around, which limits the ability for ambulances, fire trucks, and other emergency vehicles to get there to render help for people who actually need our help. We plan to keep the street racing action and work going throughout the city as our budget and staffing allows, but it's a real challenge for us currently to try to get people to want to come in and work those events because they're a challenge for us dealing with a lot of motor vehicles moving really fast around a lot of pedestrians, so it's become a challenge. For North Precinct, though, we also have other initiatives planned going into to finish off the summer and then going into the fall as school starts. In and around our outdoor spaces, our parks, green spaces, and some of our major thoroughfares to try to get those areas clean for when school starts back in the fall. But again, these will be budget and staffing dependent as long as we have people. Our main focus, of course, is always to respond to emergency call for service. We'll continue to do that to the best of our ability. We do, however, recognize the need to have some of those other big ticket items that we need to make sure that we're also focusing on in addition to our emergency calls for service. Really all that I have. To answer any questions, I'm not sure how Kevin, the MC of the event.
Yeah, that's my job. For sure. So thank you, Commander Simon, for your presentation. We're going to bring back Chief Lovell as well. So if you both would just stay with us, and I'll ask you to jump in for answering any of these questions that are coming in. For those of you from the community who have joined us today, and if you have any questions, please post them in the chat. I am monitoring the chat, and I will be answering the questions that I see, and then sometimes we get repeated questions from the same topic, and so I will try to consolidate those. We have a couple of questions already coming in, so we'll just go ahead and get started. This first one involves property crime and drug use, so I'll probably start directing this at Chief Lovell. Chief, do you think the increase in car thefts and burglaries and other property crimes could be related to an increase in drug use?
Yeah, thank you for that, Kevin. I do. I think that it probably does have some nexus to drug use. A lot of the areas that we see that in are sometimes associated with areas where we do have high levels of drug use, and we find that some people are using petty crime, theft, the sale of stolen items and things of that nature to kind of fuel the drug habit. So, we're mindful of that. And I think some of the work that we do in and around some of those areas have that in mind. And I think maybe the commander may have some more insight into North Precinct activity around that specifically. But I do feel that there is a nexus between the two.
Yeah, I would agree with what the chief said. I think there definitely is a correlation. If you want to talk about causality and what causes those, which is first, obviously committing those crimes to fuel your drug habit is what we see a lot of times. People are breaking into cars and houses and things like that to fuel that drug habit. So I would agree with the chief. There is a direct correlation.
All right, great question. And also point out Assistant Chief Jeff Bell's in here too, and I think he has the ability to unmute himself. So Chief Bell, feel free if you have anything you want to add. The next question is regarding recruitment. The question surrounds whether or not PPB is considering hiring for specific units. For example, recruitment postings to focus on the traffic division. She's wondering if this type of recruitment effort could help recruitment and overall staffing.
Yeah, I love that question. That's actually a conversation we've had here recently. I was in for the Starlight Parade, and there were several motorcycle officers from the surrounding agencies who were helping out. And I had the chance to talk with some of them, and they expressed some interest in potentially having the opportunity to come to a place like Portland to do motorcycle work. Surrounding agencies, typically the smaller ones, do post for specific roles like motorcycle officer, things of that nature. It's beneficial for a lot of them to bring on someone who can work immediately, who's already motorcycle certified, is certified in the state, and helps jumpstart their program. So I think for us, it would be something very interesting and something we'd have to discuss with the union. There's probably some bargaining implications and things of that nature. But I think there are potentially some opportunities in a unit like traffic, where you might be able to get a few bodies that you otherwise wouldn't be able to get through the regular hiring process and into motor school and out on the street doing that work nearly as quickly.
Yeah, and I know that the personnel division in their recruiting, they often highlight some of the specialty units that people can go into, even if you're a newly hired officer. I mean, everybody that is newly hired certainly goes to patrol to learn that job before they typically go to a specialty unit. But I think that's a really good point to continue to highlight some of those specialty opportunities that we have here. Next question is also about training. How many training slots does PPB have at the State Training Academy every year? And how are the efforts going to expand that in order to get more officers trained and active?
Yeah, so typically at the academy currently, they run classes of 40. So they'll have a 40 person class. And in their latest budget, they were authorized 20 classes per biennium. So 10 classes a year, 20 in a 2-year period. And typically for us, we get as many as 10 per class. So there is kind of a limit at the academy, how much capacity you could pull through. In my discussions with DPSST, they're looking at ways to expand capacity. Some of the things they've talked about are moving that number of 40 up to 60, or doing a couple smaller classes in the afternoon time. So you'd have a class of 40 during the day, and then at periodic times during the year, you'd have a smaller class of 20 that was on more of an afternoon shift. And some of the challenges they're really facing are around staffing, having enough instructors to actually teach the classes. And doing the smaller class in the afternoon would let them use some of their instructor resources on overtime to accomplish that. But they're trying to be creative, looking for ways to expand that funnel. The whole state is dependent on them to get people certified. They're the only certifying body we have in Oregon. So having a bottleneck there affects not only Portland, but everyone in the whole state.
Okay, thanks, Chief. Next question, this is surrounding BOEC and 911 operators. Chief, can you speak to the staffing of 911 operators and call takers?
You know, that is in a whole separate bureau, which is the Bureau of Emergency Communications. That's actually run by Bob Kazi. He and I did get a chance to speak a few days ago. We were together at Fire Chief Sarah Boone's retirement. And I do know that they have a lot of call takers who are in trainee status. They were able to hire a bunch, I think 40 something, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know the exact number, but they are going through training and they're hoping to get them through their complete training and have them available. But they, like many other city bureaus, were facing staffing challenges. They had the good fortune to bring in a big class of new recruits that they're currently working to train up. So I suspect that the times and the waits at BOEC will improve as those folks come online and get closer to the end of their training.
All right, another good question about burglar alarms. Any efforts underway to reduce response time to burglar alarms?
Chief, I can probably address this one.
I think Chief might be frozen. There was a little glitch earlier. So Rob, if you want to start, and then I think the Chief will catch up.
Okay. Yeah, this a lot of times with 911 dispatchers, the call gets coded and prioritized in a certain manner. And a lot of times those business alarms take a lower priority call versus a higher priority call. Any calls that affect life safety or immediate need, we tend to respond to those right away. And then burglary alarms sometimes get lowered. If it's a panic type alarm at a residence, that gets a higher coding. But for a business burglar alarm, generally BOAC will put those as a fairly low priority. So they'll be the last for the officers to get. If they have an assault call or some kind of domestic violence situation, they go to those prior, and then eventually they get to the burglar alarm. So I wish I had a good answer for you, Jamie. If that's the question. But as staffing allows, we try to get to them as best we can.
Yeah, absolutely. And as the Chief pointed out, some of these questions are related to the Bureau of Emergency Communication, which not everyone understands is separate from the Police Bureau. And they do have on their own website some, I don't know if I'd call them dashboards, but they do have information about their staffing and their responses. So I encourage you, those of you who are interested in this topic, to Google the Bureau of Emergency Communication. They'll come right up. Do we have the Chief back? Before I move on, I want to make sure I give him a chance to address that. I don't see him. So when we see him pop back on, I may give him a chance to also address that question. But the next one actually, I think would be appropriate to start with you, Commander Simon. Can you speak to PPB's opinion of Portland street response, and specifically, how much does North Precinct interact with PSR?
Well, I had worked at Central Precinct prior to being assigned out here, so I have a lot of experience as PSR first got started in downtown, and we saw some pretty good successes with them. Here in North Precinct, we don't have access to their calls for service. They're not on the same CAD system that we are, so we don't know how much they're out here. We do call them for assistance, and we get put into their queue, their dispatch queue, similar to how we have a dispatch queue. So we do have interaction with them. It's not as often as we would like, and their hours are mostly daytime hours. As they expand their program, expand their hours, we anticipate having a lot more interaction with them.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks. That was Lieutenant Morgan letting me know that both he and the Chief are in catastrophic Zoom failure. Oh, there's Chief. Okay.
I've returned.
You're back. So yeah, it does happen. It's only been 3 years of Zooming, and we're still working to make it work as well. So Chief, while you were away, we did talk a little bit about a couple of these questions, but I wanted to circle back to the one about burglar alarm response. Commander Simon kind of addressed the way that we get those calls coded and the priority level of those, but I wanted to give you a chance to take on that question as well, if you wish.
Yeah, and for us, we try to get to every call. If someone's present, that ups the priority, and that call will typically get dispatched. But a lot of times for us, it's kind of who's available, what the nature of the alarm is, and sometimes those do tend to hold. But our goal and our desire is to get to all of those as quick as possible.
Yeah, when it comes to burglar alarms too, one of the things that we discuss all the time, part of my job, of course, is communications, and we get this question frequently. And one thing I always ask people to do is to take a look at their own alarm system and make sure it's working well, because even in this day and age, we get a lot of burglar alarms that do turn out to be false, and we want to respond to those, and we want to make sure that we get there in a timely manner. But if it does turn out to be a false alarm, then of course that takes an officer away from another potentially more important call. So that's a great question. We were also discussing, Chief Lovell, we were discussing Portland street response, and Commander Simon was kind of talking about the interaction with PSR and North Precinct. But I wonder if you would offer your opinion of PSR and the role that they take on here in Portland.
Yeah, for me, I'm supportive of Portland street response. I get this question from time to time. And, my hope is with street response that they're able to grow into their full staffing and take some of that call load off of the police plate. I think some of the challenges for them have been, their efforts to go 24/7 and expand their coverage time. They're never, ever able to actually reach that full staffing goal that they had. And I think there's some question on, what would their ultimate mission be? Is it more around the lower acuity mental health stuff? Is it more homeless outreach? Are they going to be able to go in buildings or just deal with things on the street? I think there's some questions about their actual mission that they're trying to wrestle with and solve. But I think if they can reach their full potential, I think they'd be really beneficial for the city and help see what they can relieve off of our plate. I think to date that question hasn't been fully answered, but I'm really hopeful for them, and I'm supportive of them continuing to do their work.
Very good. Thank you, Chief. Just a reminder for those of you, if anybody has hopped on since we started this process, if you have questions, please type them in the chat. I'm monitoring that, and I'll pose those questions. We want to make sure everybody's question gets addressed. The next question is about traffic stops, and the question basically is in regard to when will officers start initiating stops for things like missing license plates or similar items that aren't covered by Senate Bill 1510. I think some of this might have been covered in the presentation, but I'll throw that back to Chief Lovell to kind of discuss officers making stops for things like equipment violations.
Yeah, and we have so many crashes and so many high priority safety stops that I think sometimes it's easy to let the lower level stops go by the wayside. And then when we didn't have the traffic division back, I had instructed officers to really concentrate on the safety behavior that were putting lives in danger and leading to fatal crashes. But I think now for us, it's really a matter of the type of stop. For me, the no license plate is a big one, because I think a lot of times we see those associated with some of our criminal activity, also stolen vehicles. It's very common to see those at the street takeover events and things of that nature. So I think that's an important stop. There are some things that have been addressed by the legislature, things like headlights and those type of things that we won't be able to because of the legislature to make those stops. But I think for us, we focus on the things primarily that affect safety and safe driving behavior and may lead to traffic fatalities on our roadways. And then we still do stops where we can around other things. And even like, one headlight out, things like that can be a safety issue as well. So we have a lot of discretion in that. The stops we can make that are allowed by law. So I think having the traffic division back and hopefully over time growing that division will give us the ability to make more of those stops in the future.
Yeah, and just a reminder, the annual report does have a lot of statistics on what stops were made last year, and we'll continue to track those and report those out to our community. Next question is about Measure 110, and I'll probably ask Commander Simon to answer this one, and then obviously Chief Lovell can also jump in as well. Specifically about how many Measure 110 cards have been handed out, and maybe just discuss your understanding, Commander, on the impact of Measure 110 and the decriminalization of drugs. How has that affected North Precinct and the officers' ability to address problems?
So one of the things I don't have an exact number on how many cards we've handed out. I know that our nerd team goes out with pockets full of them on a daily basis, and they have them always on hand. We have them available to all of our patrol officers in our roll call room where we meet every morning or every afternoon for roll call. There's a stack of them in the back of the room that they're encouraged to take out. But specific numbers, how many have been handed out, I don't have that specifically. I do know that when our patrol officers or our NERT team officers are out there in the field and they're interacting with people who are in some drug psychosis or drug use cycles, we do encourage them. We want them to hand out cards as best and as often as we can. They do see some of the frustrations when the officers who grew up in a different era of making those arrests or doing those investigations, and those tools are kind of limited by ballot measure 110. There is some frustration at the officer level. They feel a little powerless at times to doing a lot about it. So we do encourage them to hand out the cards. It's just kind of a different framework by people officers have to operate in. But we do hand out the cards and we encourage our officers to do that.
I know Central Precinct downtown, they had a goal of trying to hand out 500. I think it was in the month of May or June. And it was primarily their NERT team and their bike unit downtown handing those out. I don't know if they ever got to the 500 mark, but I think the last number I'd heard, they were somewhere in the 300s towards the end of that month. And it was just really kind of a goal of theirs to see how effective it would be to have folks call the hotline number. So I don't have a final number on what they ended that month with, but they do hand out several of them downtown. But I think most people will tell you the actual return on that's pretty low. Very, very few people actually end up calling for the treatment.
Yeah, certainly we know there's a great deal of public discussion about, what the impact has been and whether changes are warranted. And, we get asked this frequently as well. And we certainly don't take a position on the measure itself. We're just going to comply with the law as it's written. And then, we're happy to be a part of that larger discussion going forward about Measure 110. So great question. Thank you. I am not seeing any additional questions, so I want to give everybody an opportunity to type additional questions in before we end tonight. We did budget about 30 more minutes, so we have more time. If you want to ask a question, please feel free to type that out in the chat and we'll ask that. I want to also take this opportunity to let everybody know that tonight's presentation is a summary of a longer document that we have put out, which is the annual report for 2022. That's on our homepage. So if you go to portlandpolice.com, if you go right to our homepage, you can download that and read the entire. There's a chief's letter that is a summary. Actually, there's a chief's letter and an executive summary, and then it goes through each of the bullet points that we've discussed tonight. And I think it is very informative, has a lot of information, a lot of perspective, and it answers a lot of questions that we frequently get from our community. So looking at the chat for additional questions, we had just one pop up here. How closely, okay, this is one for the chief. How closely is the Bureau following the evolution of police oversight in Portland, particularly the Police Accountability Commission?
That's a good question. I would say fairly closely. We've had some early interactions with them. I know myself and my deputy chief, Chief Frome, did meet with them early on when they were doing some of their preliminary work to kind of determine, some probably logistical and probably some training needs that they might have going forward. That's something that the voters voted in and is still kind of an evolution in the city, but it's something that I would say we keep a semi-close eye on, but I think to this point, it hasn't really been something that requires a lot of interaction from us. I think as they get closer to implementation and actually, seating that body, then it might require a little bit more interaction and time and effort on our part.
Okay, thank you. Great question. I think I am going to review, make sure I didn't miss anyone. But if anybody is still waiting for an opportunity to ask a question, now is the time to do it. Here's one just popped up regarding body-worn cameras. Can you speak to Chief Lovell? Can you speak to the body-worn camera pilot program? And is North Precinct included in that? What will the time be between the pilot and then full implementation?
Yeah, so right now we are looking at late August for the pilot to kick off. Right now, there's still some things that have to be finalized. We have to actually get the equipment in and do some training on it and that sort of thing. But we're looking to be on schedule for late August when we start the rollout of the pilot. And currently, North Precinct isn't included in the pilot. They will be, of course, in the full rollout. But right now, we're looking at piloting it with a focus intervention team and Central Precinct. So that's the initial pilot. And I think some of the implementation is a little tricky. Some of it's going to depend on how much we learn and what we learn from the pilot. My guess is there will be some unforeseen kind of bumps in the road that we'll have to overcome. But I'm hopeful within a few months of the pilot beginning, we'll be able to move closer towards that full implementation. The good news around body-worn cameras, there are a lot of agencies in Oregon and around the country that use it and have implemented it. The bad news is it being new for us, there probably are some growing pains that we'll have to go through all on our own and learn. And there's a lot of other things, I think, on the periphery of it too. It's like your IT stuff. Is there stuff you have to download? Do your precincts have the ability to handle all that data? Do you have to make any upgrades to servers? And do you have enough people to actually view and edit and audit and all that other thing? So I think as we get through it and we go through the growing pains, we'll learn all that stuff as we go.
And Commander Simon, I think correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that the cameras that will be part of the pilot for FIT are at North Precinct. Is that right?
Yeah, they will be housed here at North Precinct. We have our Specialized Resources Division and North Precinct is housed under one building. We did just pick out the location for those. However, we ran into some infrastructural challenges. We have to have some wiring upgrade, things like that to kick off, which we've had contractors frantically trying to get done or get started on. But yeah, that FIT team camera systems will be housed where the eventual North Precinct officers' cameras will be housed as well. But it'll be one big grid in part of our building.
Yeah, we're starting to see some of that equipment come in, and I know that there will be a lot more coming out to the community from our office, just regard to the process and how that's going to be implemented. I know there's been a lot of interest in that. We actually have a web page. I keep promoting our web page, but this is also a really good opportunity. We have a dedicated page that is updated that has all of the information about the current status of the pilot program for the body-worn camera, and it includes timelines. So if you go onto our website and just scroll down on the front page, you'll see a body-worn camera link. I think there's even a photo there that you can click on, and then you can explore that, and that will actually give you some of the planned timelines. Obviously, some of those are a little bit in flux. Anytime you're implementing something this large, there's going to be hiccups, but that's our goal anyway, and getting that implemented. So yeah, we won't be too long before we start seeing some of those deployed out into our community. And another, just a comment, the webpage is certainly improving. Thank you. I appreciate that. That's a kind comment, and it's good to hear. I will give folks another chance to type in any last minute questions, but I can only tap dance for so long. So I don't want to keep everybody if everybody has had their questions answered, but this is certainly your opportunity to ask any questions that you have of the chief and the commander and any of us here at PPB. So not seeing any. I will I know, Chief, you always like to give everybody a thank you and a farewell, but I'll also give Commander Simon a chance to wrap up any closing comments for tonight's presentation. Commander?
I just want to thank those who took the time to attend. It's actually it gives us appreciation for what we do every day when we see people show up for these kind of meetings. So I just want to say thank you. I am new to North Precinct as the commander in this position, but I look forward to meeting many of you in this meeting at either at locations down the road or at meetings down the road. I just want to say thank you.
All right, and I'll let Chief, you can wrap it up.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Commander Simon. And thank you to everyone who took time out of their busy schedules to join us tonight. This is for us just an opportunity again to connect with community, talk a little bit about our challenges, talk about some of the accomplishments, and just more or less reassure people that we're out here, we're doing the best we can with what we've got to meet your needs, and we'll continue to do that. In order to do that to the best of our ability, we need you, we need to know what's important to you. We need to have connection and relationship with you in order to do it. And we're so glad that you took the time out tonight to join us. And we look forward to connecting with you in the future.
All right. Thanks, Chief. And thanks again, everybody. We appreciate you, and we will sign off and